the ubiquitous Gorka suit. No doubt, if you played a lot of shooters, you probably already have seen this. It seems like almost every first-person shooter game has the Russian forces at some point wearing this. And if you've looked into it a bit further, you'll have probably seen a lot of reviews talking about how this is a really good survival or a mountain suit, which is what this was originally designed for, was a mountain suit, later got adopted by Spetsnaz. But I've had this for about 5 or 6 years, and I was actually originally never planning on doing a review on it, but got a question recently on it, and I've had a few questions over the years, and I decided I may as well do an actual review on it, because personally, while I find this to be a pretty good suit, it's not the best, and I do think that there's better things out there. But I'm going to go ahead and just give my thoughts on both the good and the bad of this suit, and we'll go ahead and just do a quick rundown very first of some of the features of this suit. I'll go ahead and start on the jacket. Of course, as I said, this is an entire suit. You do have pants as well that come with it, but just focusing on this for now, you can see the Gorka, specifically the BARS Gorka, and I'm going to talk about a little bit of the other variants as well towards the end of this video. But normally this is made with 2 types of material. You have a sort of tarp type of material here, the darker stuff you can see, that's more brown, and then you have the more tan on here, which is just a sort of canvas material. It is extremely durable. As I've said, I've had this for 5 or 6 years, and that may actually even be an understatement. I might be getting close to 7, but not exactly sure when I got this. But point is, I haven't had any damage, and I've been wearing this a lot, especially the jacket. Not so much the pants, for reasons I'll talk about when I get to those, but jacket itself has held up great. The only actual wear that I did have at one point was the top button here. It did pop off, but these are buttons, so they're very easy to sew back on, and that's what I did, and it's been all good since. Now this material here, the more tarp-like material, this is waterproof. However, not the entire suit is waterproof. So of course the regular canvasy type of material here is not waterproof. The sections here that are waterproof are pretty well thought out. Now, of course, this isn't going to keep you dry in actual rain, but if you're going through very light rain or maybe going through the forest after rain and there's just a bit of precip left on trees and branches and all that sort of thing, then it'll help. You have it, of course, here on the shoulders, which is what would get the most wet, and kind of here on the arms where it would run down. So it works pretty well, even though it's not the entire suit that is waterproofed. Here on the arms, you do have 2 pockets, and these are Velcro, at least on the Gorka-3. And they are somewhat angled, which does make it a lot easier to actually open these. They are pretty small though. I've never really used these. Haven't really had a use for them, but they are there if you do need them. And then you have 2 more pockets here, and these are actually, I quite like these along with the rest of the pockets on here, including on the pants. So you do have 2 pockets, both secured by a button, just a single button in the middle here on your jacket. And what I really like about this, it's a really well thought out design, is that these fold over. So you can see the way you actually would put things in here is you have to kind of unfold it upwards once you unbutton it, and then you can access it. And that works really well to keep both water out as well as debris and branches and anything like that, because whenever you're going through the forest or really just outdoors for any length of time, if you're hunting, for example, I've always found that there's just branches and little twigs and dirt that just gets everywhere. But with this suit, it's not an issue. These do keep closed. As long as you do keep them buttoned, then you are completely good to go. And then you do also have an interior pocket, which is a little bit simpler, and I'll go ahead and put up some footage here, but kind of nice to have that as well for stuff you don't really want to lose and keep close to you there. Going back to the material though for just a sec, one other thing that is nice about this is it does kind of help to break up your outline as far as camouflaging. Not that well though. Of course, this is just 2 solid colors, so it's better than 1 gigantic solid blob, but it's still not great. You have very straight lines, which never happen in nature, so they stick out a lot. Not too much that can be done about that, I know, unless you get into a bit more advanced camouflaging techniques, which isn't the point of this video. But also, I did want to mention, they do make different Gorka variants that do have actual camouflage. It's just that this is the original kind of configuration, and that's kind of the coloration that you'll get. So visible spectrum, this does decent. As I said, not as bad as having a complete solid blob. Two-tone isn't as great as actual camouflage. Where this really kind of falls apart, however, and this is actually the biggest issue I have with the Gorka suit, is this has terrible IR emission. You glow like a Christmas tree under night vision. So all the tarp section just glows completely. You could probably try, if you really want to go the route of getting a Gorka, you could probably experiment with some of those IR type of sprays. I've never really experimented with them myself. I didn't really think it was worth it, but keep in mind these are a major issue. The main canvas material is fine. It doesn't reflect anything, but this just glows. So I'm backing up now a bit so we can move to the pants. So similarly, going to go ahead and start with the pockets. These are set up pretty much the exact same way. You have one button on the center of it on both your left and right sides. These are right at your side. I've had some other combat pants that for some reason put these pockets right at your rear, which is a stupid design, frankly, but these are well placed, and these have the exact same fold out type of style as the pockets on your jacket, and these are also quite large. They work really well. I've used these a lot to store stuff. You also have two more pockets here, just your regular side pockets, and then you also have two rear pockets, which again, they have a single button in the center. However, they don't actually fold over like all the rest of these pockets do. They're more like the shoulder pockets where it's just a flap covering it. So those work pretty well. Again, you can see that this also has the two-tone sort of tarp and canvas material going for it. Again, it's placed in a pretty good spot. One part I have noticed that gets pretty wet. Unfortunately, I do wish they would have covered this section here with more of the tarp material, because not all the rain or water does run off the side. A lot of it does end up kind of soaking in right here. But if you are going through rivers and all that sort of thing, what's really nice is the whole lower part by your boot is that tarp material. And another really good feature that I quite like about these pants is that on the boot area itself, you actually have a built-in gaiter. I always like those on pants. I wish that more would do that, but it's great. And they're really nice and low profile, so they don't bunch up on your boot, and you just kind of tie them around your leg, and they've always worked really well in my experience. Now, one thing I thought when I originally bought this Gorka suit, when I was going hunting in it, is I thought that this tarp material would not stick. So there's a lot of plants out there, sometimes thistle as well, but there's a weed around here that I don't remember the exact term, the name of it, but it does stick to pretty much everything. It's like Velcro. And I thought that this tarp material would repel it because it's so smooth, but it actually doesn't. So if you're going through that sort of country, just be aware that plants and that sort of stuff will still end up sticking to this, even though you would think that it wouldn't. So it'll still be kind of a pain if you're going through some of those thick weeds, and it just gets everywhere. Now, one thing I don't like about these pants quite a bit, this is something that isn't an issue with the Gorka 4. The Gorka 4 has knee pads and elbow pads, which is cool. However, these are just a reinforced knee section, but with no extra padding. And with how many pants there are available on the market, especially nowadays, I know that when this was made, these were pretty much unheard of, but you have so many options for pants that have built-in knee pads, i.e. Cry or Leo Kohler, as is my favorite. You know, a bunch of different clones of those as well, and other brands. Point is, there's a lot that have knee pads. So although I wear the jacket a lot, I've kind of gotten, I still wear the pants occasionally, but I've mostly gotten rid of using them just because there's so much better options there, especially. Another thing you have on these pants is the Gorka suit itself will come with a pair of suspenders that you can attach. So you have two options. You have a belt loop here, and then you also have these little loops on the sides that you can tie your suspenders through if you want to use them. I don't use them a whole lot. For me, I prefer to wear my pants a little bit lower, and they tend to bring them quite a bit higher than I would be preferring. So they work, they are quiet, which is always nice as well, and they're simple. They definitely work, they do the job. One nice thing also about the belt loops is if you're wearing, for example, an inner-outer belt, the belt loops are actually 2-inch, so you can accommodate pretty much every belt that you want to put under there. Then one last thing on these pants, the fly is a button-up type of fly, very similar to what you see on the older type of BDU pants. These are fine. I still prefer to have an actual zipper fly, but it does work, and one benefit of button flies is if it breaks, you can always sew the buttons back on, which is something you can't really do with a zipper. Now, personally, that's not something I've ran into, but I've seen other people talk about it in their videos. For example, I was watching a combat pants video by Garen Thumb where he mentioned that, and it is a good point. and something to keep in mind. Similarly, the jacket, the way you put this on is you just have buttons running along the front. As I mentioned, I had one pop off when a few years ago and sewed it back on, and it's been fine since. So that about covers it for a rundown of the suit itself. As for how I've been wearing it and how I've found it to hold up, as I said, durability-wise, it's great. It does have a bit of an issue with the IR spectrum, so if you're seeing this under night vision, you'll kind of stand out. Not terrible on the visible spectrum. As for actual weather, I have worn this in a lot of different temperatures, ranging from below freezing, actually quite a bit below freezing when there would have been much better options to wear, but that cold, up to 60s, 70s when I've just kind of been caught out there when it suddenly got hot. And what I found is this jacket, or this whole suit, really only works well in about 40 to 50 degrees Fahrenheit. When you get to around freezing, this is a little bit too light for that. Now, if you layer it, I would say you can get this to be comfortable around freezing, maybe slightly below freezing, but not very much below that. I would definitely recommend seeking out some thicker clothes at that point. And as far as rain, I have found that this does decent in light rain. Of course, as I said, you don't have the whole thing being waterproof, which is not great. One other nice thing, so I usually have a hat when I'm outside anyway, but if you happen to not have one, they do have a brim here on the hood, which works quite well. So if it is raining, this will kind of keep the rain directly off your face. It'll still fall pretty close to you, but it's a good idea. One thing I don't like though on this hood is it's pretty short. This actually kind of pulls up the entire jacket when I'm putting the hood up. So since I do tend to wear hats anyway, I tend not to use the hood really. It's just a bit small, and maybe I'm a giraffe, maybe this is, I don't know, just a small hood, but it's kind of just not been that comfortable to wear. So that brings us to the end of the video. So as I said, I think the Gorka is decent, but I do think there are really a lot better options out there. For example, you can get very similar functionality for the jacket part out of a waterproof soft shell, and that'll be around the same temperature range as well. And then as for the pants, you have a huge amount of options there. My personal choice, of course, as I said earlier, would be those Leo collars, and then maybe throwing on some rain pants over that. You could go with cry pants and use the gaiters with it, because then you do have the knee pads and all that. There is a huge amount of options there that I do think do things a lot better than the Gorka. Overall, my biggest gripe with this is the fact that it has that issue with IR. Now, one more thing I did want to talk about here at the end of the video. There is a lot of variants of the Gorka, as I kind of alluded to at the start. The Gorka-3, which I have, is probably the most common, but you do have a huge amount of options. There's older Gorkas. There's the newer Gorka-4, which my biggest complaint with the pants here, as I said, was the fact it doesn't have any knee pads, and the Gorka-4 fixes that. I've never really used elbow pads a whole lot. I find they just tend to get in the way more than anything, but that is there if you want it. So that is nice on that. However, I have heard that the Gorka-4, and if anyone knows in the comments, if you happen to own a Gorka-4, I would love to hear it. I've heard that it still has the same issue with IR, so I would still say the same thing, since that is my biggest gripe with this as well. And that's the main reason why I would say that there are better, more modern options now. But don't get me wrong, this does a lot right as well. But if you are still looking at getting a Gorka, some parting words I would say, to just avoid the Mordor Tack brand, which is Grey Shop's own brand. I've heard terrible things about the durability on those. The original BARS one, like I have, has been holding up phenomenally. So I would definitely recommend this one. It works great. I believe SSO also makes one, and SSO stuff in my experience has been really high quality. Admittedly, for what you are getting with a Gorka, it's actually a pretty good price for having a full mountain suit. Does a lot of things right. That covers it for my thoughts on the Gorka. Thank you all for watching. Let me know if you have any other questions on this, or if you have any other comments on anything else or suggestions for other videos. By all means, please leave those in the comments below. And I look forward to seeing you all in the next one. Take care.